Well, here I am, live streaming on StreamYard, waiting for my guest to arrive. Matt Rhodes, the leader of New England's John Birch Society, is going to be on shortly. He just called and said he's going to be 5 minutes late, which is no problem. So this is streaming on my YouTube channel, which is very much algorithmically throttled by Google, and X, which also algorithmically throttles my X account. And it's also streaming on michaelheath.tv, where it also archives, guaranteed to archive. I don't know what X does in terms of archiving a live stream, but I know YouTube archives live streams. I don't spend a lot of time creating notes or any of that kind of stuff on YouTube. I may start to do that eventually, but the first place that I'll start to create notes when I get to that point is on michaelheath.tv. So if you're interested in my live stream creations, then the best place to keep up with it will be michaelheath.tv. And then eventually I'll, God willing, begin to copy paste and whatever, and teach myself the details of creating on YouTube. But at this point, it's hard for me to justify it. I'm a retired Christian activist who started with Google at the very beginning and then watched it collapse away from not being evil. Remember those days when they said that they don't be evil was their motto. They erased that, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. And so I've personally experienced the collapse of internet culture into this constant warfare between anonymous accounts and robots against Christian morals, against the moral law, really, to tell you the truth. Just the most basic understanding of morality. There's a constant war going on, rooted in politics, but also very much affecting Western religion, which is Christianity, very much affecting it. So it's a really confusing, difficult battle space for people to operate in, especially if you're on Facebook or YouTube, because any Google product, Apple, any American big tech company just totally poisoned now. You know that Windows just released its Windows 11. I was just talking with my son on the phone, and they're forcing the exposure, what's called KYC, know your customer. They're forcing it through their account, the connection of their account to your person, to who you are, and to your device, your Windows 11 device. I don't know exactly and precisely how they're going to deploy that, but it's here. And it's all leading to this idea of a centralized global identification system, so that the next time that Bill Gates releases his virus into the wild, they'll be sure to be able to save your life with their super vaccine, which is crafted for your DNA by the latest in scientific breakthroughs. Talk about insane. So I see there's 2 people, according to StreamYard, watching somewhere, whether it's on X or YouTube, I don't know. I'm sure it isn't on michaelheath.tv. So now I'm up to 3. That's good. 3 people. So yeah, I think if you're on YouTube or X, I think you can comment if you want to, and I can see your comments. Matt Rhodes is incoming to discuss Maine politics, all things constitutional. If you have a question or a comment you want to make, please put it in your video wherever the comments can be entered. So my name is Michael Stewart Heath, and the best place to find out more about me is at michaelheath.org, michaelheath.org. And you can see that scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And Matt just arrived. So I know, Matt, you're not a morning guy. Welcome. I decided to go ahead and get started without you. I don't know if you can get me. You look like who's that guy, the podcast?
I don't know. Is that I was going for Joe Rogan, but I don't know. So I think I'm going to switch hats here.
You got to turn your audio on.
So
that makes you look more like a Maine farmer or something.
That's what I'm going for. The Maine farmer, maybe like just a recent Irish immigrant that purchased some land.
All right. So welcome you good folks who are tuning in. Feel free to say hi in the comments. Would love to know you're there. Let me know if the audio's good, if everything's looking good. So Matthew, you're still not turned on, man. You got to turn your audio on. Can you?
My audio? My audio is on. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, it looks like your audio is coming through here, but for some reason I'm not hearing your audio. Oh, I get it now. I get it. It's me. It's me. Oh my goodness. All right.
I love these chilly cold Maine mornings.
Give me a second here. You guys get to see the producer be.
Should I do like me,
There you go. I got you. I saw that the green dots were going up, indicating that you were saying something, but I couldn't hear you. It was because I didn't have my Bluetooth connected to the right device. It was connected to my phone, but not to my laptop. So anyway, we're good now. Good to see you.
Well, got your flannel shirt on with your squares. That shows that you're at least middle management somewhere in Maine. So that's good.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
That's just
I'm actually way below middle management. I don't think there's any middle management layer in Maine that would ever hire a guy who is against sodomy as publicly as I am. I think that's probably illegal in Maine now, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think everybody gets paid the exact same amount, no matter what you do. And so there's that. Yeah. What are you going to do? It's
what are you going to do?
Janet Mills and her little, her whole. Now she's got her sisters coming in. They fought against simony in this country for years. Like they had corruption with that in America, like right in the beginning. That was ostensibly for the reason for the progressive movement, that you would just move in the class of experts to get away from this lineage of, heisting of public, official, what do you call them? Political positions, which were generationally being like hijacked in America. And they were they came, the guys like Charles Merriam came along with that. And they said, oh, we got to stop this, but it's still going on. It's still like,
it's Trump just spun up a cryptocurrency, a stable coin operation. I can't remember the name of it, but if you subscribe to my email, I think tomorrow's or the next day's email will have a link to it. But he spun this thing up, and he spun up an organization, a business that has a stable coin, and his family is making $80 million a year off this operation. And it's absolute top to bottom corruption, the whole thing. And he just yesterday or the day before, what do they call it? Pardoned. He just pardoned the head of Binance, some Chinese guy, who is the one that made it possible for him to spin up this little company. Not little. I mean, $80 million. That's not little. Designed to benefit his family only. It's just for personal benefit, and he pardoned the guy. It's amazing.
Well, the real, so that's why you can't believe when somebody says it's Nancy Pelosi's, she's the only evil person. It's always like the Democrats are evil. Maxine Waters, they're millionaires. That's right. There's no multi-gazillionaires in the Republican Party, right? That are just, and it is amazing how like they spin this stuff about, the new White House wing, and it's like, Well, it's 250 million, but his private donors are going to pay for that, and they've already spun the idea that only the Democrats would be interested in getting the names of those people that are willing to spend money on the White House. So no, that's a regular interest. We want to, and you're doing this in the face of an economy that's $38 trillion in debt, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, this is just spitting on the poor, right? You're doing it in like one of the most crime-ridden states in areas in the country. I mean, they don't ever show DC how really bad it is. DC is bad. You can get killed just walking down the street, maybe 5 blocks from the Capitol. It's really bad.
Yeah.
So that's why they always put up those fences. So a lot of people don't spend any time in DC or don't realize how bad that city really is. And but anyway, so they're doing this right in the middle of a failing economy. Jobs are going overseas, and now Trump is giving money to Argentina. What is it, like $80 billion he's giving to Argentina? Just
Yep,
out of nowhere. Sorry, I don't know if that was the direction you wanted to go in. I didn't want to get into like Trump bashing too much, but this is not really about Trump. It's just about, in general, the from Janet Reno, her sister, who's running, to everybody else. This is just generational theft of Americans. So.
this is I don't want to get into Trump bashing either. This is the demoralizing of the West, and it started you started to do a teaching with my support on a live stream that was getting into the details and naming names, but it started with this the ascendancy of this technocratic idea, this idea that technicians and you've already alluded to that point, but
yeah.
This idea that technicians and experts are going to, and progress, scientific progress, is going to save us. It's going to become our salvation. So we're going to get saved through money and through politics and through government overreach. We're going to get saved by it. But what we're actually seeing now is this incredible simony. Now, simony, use that word, and I'm like, that's where you hire your relatives, right?
Right. Yeah. I was. There's another word that is more exactly what it is, but I think simony is more like your relatives benefit from your position.
Right.
I think
right, and that's everywhere now. Look at Janet Mills. She's another. Let's bash on Jezebel Janet Kills for a minute. We don't have to just bash on. We don't just have to just bash on Trump. We can bash on our own governor, Jezebel Janet Kills. Her family goes back to. I mean, the story I love to tell, which you've heard before, but I'll keep it very short, is her dad, the lawyer, who's ends up depressing his own legal client so much that he commits suicide in a Pennsylvania jail. And the guy happens to be Wilhelm Reich, who literally wrote the book entitled The Sexual Revolution in Vienna, Austria, and published it and got himself thrown out of Europe by both the communists and the fascists, and ends up in Maine. In New York City and Maine, he ends up with Paul Mills, Janet's dad, as his lawyer, who then becomes powerful as the New England district attorney for the national government. And now that he's powerful, he decides that his old client, who he worked for 10 years and actually made his life possible in America after coming from Europe, and he becomes his prosecutor, his judge, jury, and executioner. And the guy ends up in prison and kills himself. He's so depressed. Not that Reich is anything to write home about. The guy was like way out there. He believed that he could create a machine that would harness the orgasms, the sexual orgasms of all the adults within a certain period, and then he could direct the clouds and the storm clouds away from a particular geography. I mean,
you can't make this up, right? I mean, this is
it's better than a Hollywood movie, and it's right here in Maine.
Well, not to get really dark on this stuff, but isn't that, there's this privatization of every sector of our society that, in our political life. So if you want to become part of the political machinery, the Republican political machinery, you have to support Israel, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. Or you have to support Bobby Charles, who, we know was part of the CFR. And
what's Israel have to? What's Israel? What's Israel have to do with Maine?
Well, Israel basically they just had a bunch of right. What does it have to do with it? It shouldn't have anything to do it, but
right. Exactly right.
Yeah, so you can't get into the club. You can't get into the club. You're not allowed in because you have to pass these tests. You have to know the handshake. There's a check sheet. Right. You have to It's all
You,
about.
you have to, and on the question of Israel, you have to know for a fact, even though you don't, you have to know for a fact that 6 million Jews were killed in gas chambers that never existed. That's been proven, by the way, and then cremated. 6 million bodies were cremated in a period of time that, under any scientific scrutiny, would have taken hundreds of years. That was done in like 3 or 4 years. 6 million bodies were cremated in places where there weren't even crematoriums to speak of. There was a couple little crematorium things in the wall, but that was just for the sick who had died. It wasn't a programmatic cremation of 6 million bodies. Anyway, all this stuff can be read in books now, and it's all over the internet.
It's all over the internet.
But yet, if you say what I just said in Maine, which is how far from Israel, right? Halfway around the world. If you say this in Maine, it's like I'm a bad guy. I'm like a.
You're right. I have to bless Israel, and that's all been refuted. I mean, what's his name? Pastor Charles. Forgot his last name. He just did a podcast on that. He just took Israel apart. I mean, took the whole Zionism apart biblically. It's the fact that people would say that. It says all nations will be blessed. There's nothing about the Jews or still have a second covenant. There's no, and the thing is that you have to remind people, these people hate Jesus Christ. That's all there is to it. They don't just dislike him or have some sort of like agnostic disdain. They hate the guy.
And we don't hate Jesus Christ in me. We don't hate Jesus Christ in Maine. And why do we not hate Jesus Christ in Maine? Well, it's because if you go all the way back to the 1600s, when Maine was first being settled, you got guys like that priest up in Nordswalk that you and I went to honor. We prayed at the foot of the monument. You got guys like him representing the French who come into the Indian village there and lives with the Indians for 30 years and preaches the gospel to them, and they end up converting, and they end up coming to confession, and they end up becoming a group of people in this particular village where the priest says these guys are serious about not sinning because they come to confession, and when I receive their confessions, and I got to tell you, these guys mean it. These folks are going for being forgiven of their sins and not sinning again. So you got that's in our history. And then you've got on the other side of it, with respect to the English, you've got the Puritans and the Pilgrims coming here. And for all their faults, right? Both of us are Catholic, but for all of their faults, if you go and look at the monument to the Pilgrims in Plymouth, Massachusetts, which is still there, the largest freestanding granite monument in America, I think, then what you find is the high value that they placed on Christian morals, on Christian morality, and on the Bible. It's depicted in stone in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So this is America. This is New England. This is us. We're Christian. We're not Muslim. We're not Jewish. We're Christian, right?
Right. So I wonder how, you go from, these Christian foundation to this idea that suddenly, you get permission, you get actually an order from Boston in writing to go slaughter Father Rahl and these Abenaki warriors. And that was actually a government decree. That wasn't just something like a bunch of random guys went, ooh, we don't like the, we're doing, no, not on here. I'm sorry. This was, they went and they scalped them, and they took their scalps back to Boston. So,
right. And speaking of Boston, we're going metaphorically, Paul Medore and I, next Saturday. Maybe if you have time, you could join us. We're going down and back to the pro-life march.
Okay.
And we're going to be with Catholic men wearing suits and ties, marching from the baby murder center in Boston, Planned Parenthood Center, to the Boston Common, where we're going to spend about an hour hearing from speakers at the Boston Common. I'm there, and dude. So if you want to come down with us, let me know. I guess you've let me know. So we'll work out the details. And any of you 8 people who are watching us right now, if any of you are interested in joining us, you got to be a man, though. Got to be a man, and you can't be a false whatever training. You got to be a real man.
You can't like, yeah, I got waited on by a guy down, I don't know what you call him, down in New Hampshire. I was over there on some business, and I went to this little Greek place, and it was clearly this, transvestite person. And I hate to say this, but one of the things the transvestite community doesn't realize is that we already have enough ugly women, and it's a horrible thing to say, but it's like and so you're phobic because you don't want to date what is ostensibly an ugly woman. If you were like even to agree with this and go, oh, okay, you're a woman now, you're still ugly. You're still not. And so I'm
right
off the air.
Yeah, no, there's nothing feminine about that whole thing.
Right. They don't look feminine at all. They look like the worst version of what a woman can be. There's tons of makeup, there's just garishness, and it's and then
the worse it gets. There's a really smart person who I like to listen to, who is a man pretending that they're a woman, but they're small, and they're a male that's small and thin enough to sort of get away with it, so they're not super ugly. But you watch the person speak, and this is an expert in their field, and their voice is obviously the voice of a man.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's such cringe. And then for me to say that publicly means I'm evil because I'm being judged.
You don't have to. They've taken away what they're trying to take away free thought. They're trying to tell you that your feelings are not what you think they are. Your thoughts are not what they are. You don't have control over your own faculties. I mean, feminism. This is a natural outcropping, or what do you call it, like a feminism? Because really, what is feminine produced? It's produced masculine women, and it produced women that have adopted all the worst values and behavior patterns of men, whereas women were seen, as protectors of the home. They were the nurturers. The Bible even talks about a man leaving his mother and father and cleaving to his wife. And that word in Greek is literally just like expressive of how a baby would cleave. But we no longer have women like that. We have women that are acting like men. So men have nowhere to go. They don't have women to cleave to, which the Bible tells us that we should. And so they've forsaken every role that God could have given to them. And we're supposed to bow to this personage, or whatever you call this person, that is nothing. It's not even human. They're basically transvestites, but they just haven't done the surgery yet.
And what Christianity teaches us is that it's not the women who are going to answer for this on Judgment Day. It's the men.
Sure.
It's the men who are going to answer for this. So if you're scrolling your porn on your phone, and you're using that as an excuse to not think about your responsibilities, your eternal responsibilities related to your salvation, then shame on you. Because God, on Judgment Day, you're going to be some surprise. Because God is going to...
Right, exactly. There's some account that men created this situation. Created this situation because we didn't treat our women properly. And partially this comes from Protestantism, come on. And what do they say in New England? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Why is that? Because men had priority in terms of bathing. So the man gets in after the day and he's filthy. And then it goes down the line. Everybody's using the same bathwater until you get to the baby. So you end up with like a high mortality rate in New England because of this perversion of the man as the head of the household, as this that was a perversion. The actual thing that men were supposed to do is protect the women, protect the children, and then he'll take care of himself later. He comes last, not because he's not important, not because he's not head of the household, but because he understands that who he's taking care of is weaker. But the Protestants turn that around; they flip it on its end. So you end up having dining room furniture where the woman doesn't have armrest. You can only get that in New England. You can't get that in the South. You can only find their New England dining room sets. They're rare, but the woman's doesn't have armrest because she's supposed to be up and down the entire time, and tending to everybody or whatever it is. So that perversion begins with Protestantism. The empty out, and I basically blame the Protestants for everything because it's a perversion of Christ's teaching, because it exalts the man in a way that he should have never been exalted, and that's why we have the problems we have today.
Well, the seat of the Western Orthodox Church, which would be where its capital city is Rome, holds that Protestantism is a heresy. It's a falling away from the theological ideas and the metaphysical truths of the church, of the Christian church. That's what the Western Church. And probably the Eastern Orthodox Church holds to a similar view, I would guess. But I know that the Western Roman Catholic Church holds to that view that Protestantism is heretical. It's a falling away. Does that mean that if you're a Protestant and you're baptized in water according to the command of Jesus in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as John the Baptist initiated baptism, does that mean that you're not going to go to heaven? The Catholic Church doesn't teach that. The Catholic Church teaches if you're baptized in water, you may or may not make it to heaven. Because it's not simply about water baptism.
Right.
It's also about what the book of James teaches, which of course Martin Luther threw out of the Bible. He erased it from his Bible. Martin Luther did. But what the book of James teaches is that works are indeed they're part and parcel of your salvation, part and parcel of your being a Christian. It's how you live your life, what you do with morality. This is a part of what it means to be a Christian, right?
Well, there's a great book, Mike. I don't know. It's really small. Your readers can find it online, a PDF. It's called, or your readers, listen to me, your watchers, whatever you call them. You can tell them. So it's called The Economic Effects of the Protestant Reformation, and it's by George O'Brien. And it at the very end of the book, he starts talking about Martin Luther's later works, how he regretted, how he upended civilization because of the Protestant Reformation, perverted the natural ends of man, marriage, things like that. And so I think everybody should read that book if they want to understand that when you have a church that tries to control not only in other words, like Protestant is an arrival point. You become a Protestant or baptized in that church, and that's where you stay. There is no growth because they believe in the total depravity of the soul, because nothing is not affected by original sin. So there's no growth in that. Like when you become a Catholic, you literally begin walking with Christ every day and toward perfection. And sometimes, like as Catholics, we believe that you're not going to. We don't know if you're going to get to heaven. We don't know if you're going to. We don't make a subjective determination of people's soul. We work out our salvation with fear and trembling, and Protestantism doesn't get that. To me, there's no growth in Protestantism. It's an arrival point, and that's why it dies, because it doesn't invigorate people. There's no mystery to your life. There's no companionship with Jesus Christ. And anyway.
To continue the point about New England. So New England is where the English really started one of their most vigorous settlements. The other one was in Virginia, early on. So you had Virginia, which remained more Anglican and started Anglican and remained more Anglican, whereas New England was started by the Pilgrims in Plymouth and the Puritans in Boston, and they were both connected in that they were sort of organically tied back to Oliver Cromwell from the mid 1600s. And that was tied back to King Henry VIII in the early 1500s. And so during those 200 years leading from 1500 to the late 1600s, to the turn of the century to the 1700s, you saw the collapse of the Christian religion in England, to the point where in 1650 Oliver Cromwell called himself Moses, compared himself, I think, to Moses, either Moses or whoever it was, stood against Amalek. And you've got Benjamin Netanyahu today doing the same thing. He just gave a speech. He just gave a speech in Hebrew where he called himself. Let's say it was Moses. Don't quote me on it. It may have been. But anyway, they're up against Amalek, and the order in the Old Testament in the Bible is that all of the Amalekites were to be slaughtered, men, women, and children. And that's his justification. That's Netanyahu's justification for the genocide in Gaza right now, today. So it's a very current issue. But with Oliver Cromwell, 1650, same time that New England's being settled, that was the first regicide in Europe, in all of Europe, was Oliver Cromwell beheading the king.
Hmm.
King, I think it was King James. Do you remember Charles? King Charles Stuart was beheaded, and then so that precipitated a crisis in terms of English hierarchy and order and authority, and that crisis jumped the Atlantic and came to New England.
Yeah.
Through the Pilgrims and the Puritans. I encountered all of this up close and personal in a sense historically when I worked as a park ranger near Portland a couple of years ago, and studied the history of Richmond Island, which, if you've been to Crescent Beach or to Kettle Cove Beach, you've observed Richmond Island. It's that beautiful island that's just off the coastline of Maine there.
Yeah.
And that island was settled in 1630 by a very successful businessman, fisherman, who was attached to a lord, to royalty or whatever, to aristocracy in England. And it was successful. The island ran the first successful fishery in New England, English fishery in New England, right there on Richmond Island. And then when Cromwell murdered the Stuart king, all of the property rights mechanisms of England fell apart, and Richmond Island was abandoned because nobody could figure out who owned it. So this is the consequence of the collapse within the English system of the Christian religion. It never ends up in a good place because there's no possibility for religious unity. It just keeps fracturing. It keeps splintering. How many denominations are there now? Like 40,000.
40,000, but I think it's more like 45. And then, of course, now we probably have about 20% of those are either trans churches or lesbian churches where they're,
And everybody's seeing it. Everybody's feeling it. Everybody's wondering about it. Why is my church so loyal to Israel? That doesn't mean, why? Is it because of eschatology, end times, or something? So we have to love the Jews if we're going to get Jesus to come back at the right time or something. And everybody's starting to say, what?
Most of the Protestant denominations I think they're already Judaized in the sense that there was no social order. Like Christ, our Lord, did not talk about a specific social order. That was developed over time through natural reasoning. The church, how do things happen in a Christian society when charity is your main, divining rod? That's what Christianity was. And so the church developed out of Christ's teaching of love, mercy, and charity. And so Catholic Europe, Christian Europe, grew up out of the teachings of Christ. And so a system was created naturally, organically, based on Christ's love. But when the Protestant Reformation happened, they rejected everything that Christendom already had. So the banks go, instead of people tithing to the church, they're tithing to the banks. They're tithing to the Bank of Denmark, I think it is, and England. So the church no longer is getting money. That's one of the regrets Martin Luther talks about in this book. He says that Christians are no longer trying to convert the heathen nations. Christians are more concerned about converting each other and rejecting the Bible wholesale where it's inconvenient. And that's what led to situational ethics, Christian nominalism. Basically, it's very impossible to meet somebody today that will say, well, I don't believe that because I believe that's how it was in the old days and they were strict back then. And that's, so even the idea of sin has been rejected. So, and that started.
We have a totally detached and unrealistic sense of the Middle Ages. We have a totally detached and totally ignorant and totally propagandized sense. When I say we, who do I mean? The English.
Yeah.
The English. And it's all rooted back to what's called Whig history, the Whig political party that spun up after King Henry VIII threw out the Pope and destroyed and demolished and obliterated the presence of. Most Americans don't even know that England was civilized itself in relationship to Italy, and specifically in relationship to Rome. Rome's influence through the Roman Catholic Church in the British Isles played a major role in civilizing the pagan tribes of England from the fall of Rome the collapse of the Roman Empire around 500, 600, 700 AD up until 1500, when you had the split because of the German monk, not even English, Martin Luther, and his ideas coming to England and then becoming Presbyterianism and becoming Anglicanism after King Henry. And we don't know these things. We're not taught these things. These things are kept from us. These are facts. These are
this is why every time you talk to like a Calvinist or any sort of Protestant, they'll say you'll get to a certain point and they'll go, and then suddenly they're talking about the Old Testament, and you're like, well, that I don't know why we're talking about the Old Testament, because that was all rejected. That was how society was supposed to function. The Amalek stuff, you could practice usury among the heathen nations. That was all thrown away with the birth of Jesus Christ, with the new law. So why are the Calvinists everywhere they go turning into Jews? Because they didn't have a culture or society that they could use as a backdrop. So they went to the Old Testament. That's how it was explained to me. That's how Michael Jones talked about it too.
Right. And of course, the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church is that the Old Covenant was not thrown away or anything. It was fulfilled by the New Covenant. It was fulfilled by Jesus Christ. And then it was fulfilled by the teachings of Jesus Christ in the Gospels, and by the actions, more importantly, of Jesus Christ in going to the cross and being murdered, slaughtered, and then resurrecting 3 days later. So it was fulfilled. The Old Covenant was fulfilled. The Old Testament was fulfilled. The covenant was fulfilled. And then there's a new covenant, and that's described by the New Testament, which the Catholic Church has taught from the beginning. Once the canon of the scriptures was authorized by the first or second council way back 300-400 years after Christ, as authoritative, the Bible is authoritative. It's infallible according to the teachings of the Catholic Church. But the Old Covenant was fulfilled by the New Covenant. And then, of course, that idea was put through the prism of the City of God, written by Augustine, who was in North Africa. The City of God became the blueprint for the development of Europe.
Yep.
And then Augustine's ideas about just war theory became authoritative as part of the moral law, or at least the moral sensibilities and commitments of all the nations of Europe, until all of that collapsed with Protestantism. And then with the collapse of Europe culturally, with respect to especially the Protestant nations, but also the Catholic ones, you end up in the most bloody and horrific murdering that the world has ever seen in the 20th century. It's like, and people don't think about why that happened.
How many people were killed in the Peasants' War? Like over 300,000 people as a direct result of the Protestant Reformation. How many nuns and convents people were slaughtered? So, when your religion is based on an idea of rebellion, I see people post it on Facebook all the time. They love the fact that Luther was this rebellious, God, and that he's their Barabbas. He's their liberator. And I would imagine that like none of the Catholic saints, when they found corruption in Rome, ever said, we need to dismantle the church and destroy it. They said, people are human. We're going to fix this through penance and, whatever we had to do. And long suffering. Right. Saint Joseph of Avila did it. Saint Francis of Assisi did it. There was many saints that had to. You're always good. Look, somebody said to me one time, they said, how could you be Catholic when they did so many evil things? I said, you know what? How could you even be a human? And mankind is evil. Corruption, you don't need an institution to see. Look at around you. Look at in the news. People are doing horrible, heinous things to each other because they've been given license to do it. They steal now. They kill each other. It's horrible out there. So anyway, you don't need an institution. People are corrupt, and anyway. So Catholicism controls that. You have confession. You have life with Christ. You're supposed to live. You're supposed to bring yourself into the perfection of Christ. And
the church has never taught that just because you have entered into holy orders, you shed your humanness. The only one who's perfect the only one who's divine, the only one who's perfectly holy is God himself, the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Well,
And then, right?
Your logic is false. Okay, so they say basically if Catholicism was real, it would produce only perfect people. Well, you can say the same thing about Protestantism or Christianity, and that's exactly what the atheists do now. They basically come around saying Christianity is false because it doesn't produce perfect people. Well, that's a logical error. You can't.
Right. And the point I was driving to was that the human element of the church never goes away. It
Right.
never disappears. It never isn't there. The Pope Leo the 14th, is a human being. He's
Right.
a sinner. Pick your cardinal, pick your bishop, pick your priest. They're all still human beings.
Yeah.
And so, which means they're tempted like all the rest of us, etc. The difference between the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church is the Catholic Church hold to the sacramental understanding of the church. So what does the church bring into the world? What does it bring to you as a human person? It brings you the sacraments. What are the sacraments? Well, whatever they are. I don't want to get into all that, but there's a sacramental culture and there's a sacramental practice that exists within the Orthodox traditions. There's two of them, the Eastern Orthodox and the Western Orthodox. The Western is Roman Catholic. The Eastern is centered now in Moscow since Constantinople was renamed into Istanbul when it was conquered by the Muslims back in 1450, whatever it was. And so the Eastern capital moved from Constantinople to Moscow. So the seat of, and to Greece, of course, you got the Greek Orthodox, and the whole Eastern Orthodox world is very different than the Western one. So I'm not making any claims to be
interesting.
I'm not making any claims to be an expert on all that, but both of those traditions are sacramental religions.
And that's what your life with Christ is. You have to have sacraments, you have to have sacrifice, you have to live, your life, and there's a departure the way people think. They believe that God created this earth for us to kind of go and have fun. It's like a little party. And then we have salvation in heaven, and we go to meet all of our friends, and we have like picnics forever. But this is an anteroom to heaven, and this is a proving ground for heaven. We don't, and so the confusion for Protestants is they say, well, you sound like you're saying that you can earn your salvation. No, we're not saying that. What we're saying is that you better be fit to enter the kingdom of heaven when you get there. And so God's not going to let you live in debauchery in this life and then go, well, yeah, check it out. You can come right in. You have to work out your salvation with fear and trembling.
Well, the popular understanding among the most conservative of Protestants, which are known as evangelicals, is as long as they went forward to an altar call with Billy Graham, then they're good. They're saved. They're saved. Once saved, always saved. That's a doctrine that some evangelicals hold to, and most of the ones that I worked with, that's what I saw in them, and that's kind of what I felt more or less was once saved, always saved. So I went to the altar call. I made the decision. I'm saved. Now I'm saved, and that ain't working out so well right now. We'll look around and it's repeated itself. So this reality is what inspired Dr. E. Michael Jones to ask hard questions after he was thrown out of a Catholic women's college early in his life. And over the issue of killing babies in the womb, which he felt was just a no-brainer. If you're a Catholic, then you know that you don't kill babies after they've been conceived. That's just something It's sort of automatic if you're a Catholic. But then he's a professor at a Catholic women's college in South Bend, and he gets thrown out. And so then he's thinking, what happened? What's going on? Where does this come from and stuff? So he keeps writing books. He writes books, and he also publishes a magazine. So over years, he keeps thinking about it and whatever. And then he writes The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, which is now available in 3 volumes. And I highly recommend you I highly recommend you stop scrolling porn or whatever you're scrolling, and that you buy that book series and you read it, because he proves from history that there is such a thing as a revolutionary spirit in mankind's soul, in the soul of every human. There is such a thing as a revolutionary spirit. And there is such a thing as a revolutionary spirit that's connected with Christ, that has with Jews, that has the complexion of having murdered their own Messiah. Can you think of anything more revolutionary in terms of an act than murdering your Messiah, God's son? And so he makes this, that's kind of part of the thesis of the book. And he refers to history, and he uses Jewish sources in the book. And he demonstrates that this revolutionary spirit is a problem for all of us, but especially for Christians. It's a problem. You need to think about it. And we Americans, especially right now, need to think about it, right? Is being a revolutionary really all that special? Really?
Well, and I always wonder about that. Like, I could see somebody saying something, oh, Martin Luther had this renewed doctrine, and it was great that he taught this and he taught that, if you could see that. But every day it's all about his rebellion, how he was this great, and it's almost, you see this revolutionary spirit like in the Republican Party. They're not looking for the person that they know is humble, going to follow Christ, might be a little bit ugly, is going to obey the Constitution. They're not looking for any of that. They don't look for a person who's holy. They're not. Look, when at one point popes were like, they were elected by popular demand. People would, the crowds would go into a monastery and drag some poor soul out, and he'd be like kicking and screaming. And he'd say, "I don't want to be pope. We all get killed," or something like that, And
well, they all did get killed for the first 200 or 300 years.
Yeah.
You sign up for pope, you sign up for martyrdom.
So this guy, guy gets dragged out. But whereas now you have people that go, "Oh, I can solve everything for you," and Americans are constantly looking for their liberator. That's the problem. Americans, liberation comes from your own soul. Liberation comes from your personal life with Christ, from the sacrament.
You can be a liberated poor person. You can be a liberated street person. You can be whatever. You can be liberated, right? Just doesn't have anything to do with your
well, and so,
suffering. In fact, can be a marker of holiness. And look at the example of Christ.
Well, America isn't saved by heroes, and that's the problem. That's why guys like Mark Levin and Mark Meckler and all these clowns with the Convention of States, because they come in offering a magical solution for everything. They come and they say, "This is the trick," and it's all gimmicks, it's all games, it's all we're just going to. So this is the whole thing. Goes back to the same thing, Mike. And I guess I'm trying to say it in a way to say that you can't have Americans who's and I showed you in my presentation, who have had such a dramatic philosophical shift from the beginning, suddenly turn around and say, "Oh, we're going to have a solution that would have been maybe okay in the first 10 years of our country," and give it to a bunch of people that believe that they all act like socialists. All people, all Republicans, Democrats believe that the government is there as a provider, as a fixer, as somebody that's doing things for people. And, like I look at my notes here, and the birth of the technocratic age, which is what we're in, starts right with, during the Progressive Reformation, where government is seen as an instrument of efficiency. People look to the government as heroes. They look to the government as providers, and you're not going to elect anybody that's good as long as they have that thinking on their head. That's all there is to it. And that's the Republican Party. And they're always going to lose against the Democrats because the Democrats are better. The Democrats provide the higher value system. It's concrete. You can see it. It's like, they get provided food, shelter, and water, which is, Maslow's lowest hierarchy of needs. And then at the same time, they provide them, with the Agenda 2030, which is basically the religious substructure of the entire world now. It's a religion. It's the SDGs, the 17 sustainable goals of the UN are the religion of the Antichrist. They are the religion of the Antichrist. It's the new world religion. And so when you provide that to people, they're like, okay, well, now we have our own little religious substructure. This is who we are. And then you have the Republicans over there. They can't even agree on should we let people starve to death or not. I mean, we have the 10th Amendment, for crying out loud. Pull that out of your pocket and say, yeah, we would like to not let people starve to death, but we don't want the federal government to do it. We want to have our own state programs. And we can't do those state programs because the federal government has crippled the states. States don't even have their own money, like New Hampshire, Massachusetts, to turn on the lights without using federal funding. That's the goal. So that they would take, and in essence, they've taken the ability for states to do what they would naturally do, or the people, and strip them of all sovereignty, strip them financially in every way. That was what the progressives wanted. You create a federal bank that as soon as you use that money, it creates interest. You take that money, that green crap out of your pocket, that as soon as you spend it, you're increasing the debt to the goal is to get off of their money, stop using the crack dealers' money. That's all they are. They're crack dealers.
Right. And we're uniquely positioned here in Maine to step up and start taking responsibility. I've heard you talk about this. Our villages are we're a rural state. We're somewhat we are sparsely populated. Our biggest city is Portland. That's only about 80,000-90,000 people. Yeah. Here I live in the capital city, and it's only about 20,000 people. And it doesn't take a whole lot of us to step up and start taking responsibility for things to change here in Maine. And I'm excited because I really believe we're on the threshold of positive changes in this direction. The Constitution is still the law of the land. It's still, most people are very ignorant of it, but it in terms of its being enforceable and it being in force, the Maine state constitution and the national constitution, that's still the law of the land, as much as all the politicians ignore it and manipulate it. Those are the principles of Maine and of America that we can and must appeal to. Hats off to you for being the representative of John Birch Society here in Maine. And that's your mission in life, is to encourage people to read and understand and live by constitutional.
It's our contract. It's our contract with each other. It's the agreement that we make with the government. This is the things you're allowed to do. These are the things you're not allowed to do. When I tell people, they're going into these town meetings with the wrong questions. They're going in with the wrong attitude. You ask them two things: where does it say you can do that, and who told you to do it? Because I certainly didn't. So you're legislating without my permission. I didn't give you the authority to do that, and I don't know where it is. So we have to look at permissions and boundaries, and that's what the John Birch Society does. Robert Welch spends 2 chapters talking about personal responsibility in the Blue Book of the John Birch Society. If you haven't read it, you should read it, because it tells you that the fight is against collectivism. Collectivism is a natural cancer. People tend to create these overwhelming systems to regulate, how many times you can go to the bathroom. Basically, people become a homeowners association on crack. That's what people want. That they want hyper planning. That's a symptom of disease. So when you see like all this planning going on, 97,000 planning agencies in America, and the Convention of States is trying to tell you that Congress is the problem. Well, that's a joke. Okay. The fact is that people have delegated their freedoms to municipal associations. They hire
and their responsibilities. They've delegated their freedoms as well as their responsibilities. We're already slaves. I was thinking about running for the budget committee, and so I took a walk in the neighborhood and I encountered an older gentleman who's an acquaintance of mine. And I said, I'm thinking of serving on the budget committee. You got any ideas? And he said, oh yeah. He says, I'm full of ideas. He said, right here in front of my house, we've got this pavement on this street in our neighborhood. I'm willing to take responsibility for the pavement in front of my house in terms of cleaning up the sand after the winter. I'll go out there with a broom and I'll take care of the sand. I'll scoop it up and I'll deal with it. And why aren't we talking about things like this in order to solve our problems with respect to being able to afford maintaining our roads and maintaining our little town here of Chelsea, Maine? I thought, well, that's a brilliant idea. That's brilliant. Good for you.
We don't even Mike. I lived in this town called East Berlin in Pennsylvania. And I'll tell you what, that little downtown, after a snowstorm, there wasn't a stitch of snow on the ground, because you ever see those little tractors? They look like little Tonka toys, and all the old retired men would come out through town, and they're picking up all the snow and they're putting it in. And then the guy at the farm down the street, he's lending a portion of the fertilizer, which acts as a good melter. And at the end of the season, everybody goes around and picks up this fertilizer, and it gets reused right into, to be made for fertilizer. And so you have a whole town cleaning up all the snow. I was at a town meeting over there one time, and there was a tree blocking a bridge, and everybody's like, well, we got to get some money together so we can get that, hire somebody to do this. Two good old boys got up from the meeting, walked outside, removed the tree, and came back and sat down. And they were like, your tree problem's done. So that's what we need. We can't. So I say, we worry about, our worries are over another town. When I say it to John Birch Society, not to plug all the time, Robert Welch's idea is that the flashpoint of any global manipulation begins in your town level. If they lose the towns, they lose everything. So
they're in the process. The powers that be, the power that has been concentrated through the abuse of the idea of currency, the power that has concentrated, they're in trouble. From what I can see, that cabal is in trouble in the West.
They don't want interdependent communities. They don't want you. Well, listen, I worked for the Jews down in Florida. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the Jews don't use that money. They have a script system. They don't use that green crap because they know it's worthless. They know it's garbage. So what they do is, like, you do a job for somebody, and they'd say, well, do you want script or do you want cash? You'd always say, I want script, because guess what? It's not traceable. So it's a piece of paper. It says, I owe you whatever, 10 meals at my restaurant. So you go to move a guy, and he moves his house and he owns a restaurant, or he provides you with some other service. Script is the answer. And the Jews know it. And so the thing is, it's like, if they're not using our money, these wealthy guys that are part of a massive network in South Florida, they know something and they're doing it, but Christians aren't doing it because we don't trust each other. Because we just basically don't want to work together. There's people I know, I can introduce you to guys, Mike, all day long, that have farms that are willing to feed. I know a guy that's feeding entire communities right now, and he's off the radar. Right. He just goes around. He grows all this food, and he goes around. And he just gave me like $300 worth of food last night.
Yeah, sure. And that there's going to be more and more and more of that, because there's not going to be any alternative, because this system that Donald Trump presides over is collapsing. It's collapsing. Nobody. I took my grandchildren to breakfast 2 or 3 weeks ago in a town, in a popular town. I'm not going to name the town or the restaurant.
Yeah,
but this was 4 little children. So children's wanted a children's menu, $80 for breakfast here in Maine. I'm so disgusted by this whole price issue with respect to restaurants. I'm not going anymore. My wife and I are making arrangements not to eat out anymore.
Yeah, because the food is not good. It's not made very well. It usually comes cold. It's tasteless. And I don't know if that's because there's too much arsenic in the water in Maine and people just don't have taste buds here. I know that's a dig when people from Maine. It's like, you'll talk to somebody and go, oh, this restaurant's awesome. You're like, okay, you don't have taste buds. Sorry. I'm a pretty terrible person. I mean, in terms of fact is, like, I love Maine. I love the independent spirit. Definitely. How could you not admire people that had to build on this land and grow food? It's horrible soil. It's a tough life, and you have to eat whatever you can. So, but I say, Christian communities, good Christian communities. Well, let me just say this one thing. I know we're running out of time, but I do want to say that the worst thing that happened during the COVID crisis is it brought all these kind of like hippies and liberals into the freedom movement. And those are the people that are running things. And unless those people become saved, or, find Christ, or become Catholics, or however you want to say it, I'm not even going to but until those people find Jesus Christ and they understand Christian doctrine the way it existed under Catholic Europe, none of these groups are going to work at all. They're just going to keep complaining about COVID. They're going to have us chasing our tails in tangents all over the map. You know, they're doing this now. RFK is doing that. That's all it is. It's just a miasma,
Right.
craziness. So,
And it's coming apart. It's coming apart. It's not right here in Maine. It's coming apart. And what I see emerging is a very strong interest on the part of good people, Mainers of goodwill, in the moral law.
right.
Does it exist? And if it exists, what is it? And what is it in the practical sense? What is the moral law in the practical and political sense? In other words, what is the moral law for Maine if we're going to continue as a state and as a civilization and as a society? What is that moral law? And I would argue, Matt, that there's a very simple and quick answer to that question that nearly all Maine people can agree with and will end up agreeing with. And it has nothing to do with Allah or the Quran or the Talmud or even it, but it does have something to do with the Torah because it comes from Exodus in the Old Testament, and it's called the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
The Ten Commandments can be the moral law for all Maine citizens right now. Most Maine citizens can agree that the Ten Commandments of the Bible are a good start to understanding the moral law. And the reason is because we're part of Europe, we're part of the West, and after the Roman Empire collapsed and Europe grew up, that the Ten Commandments were taught as the moral law, and we're still living on the fumes of that in Maine. So it's totally impractical to suggest that the moral law is going to heal Maine is from the Quran, because there aren't enough Muslims here. It's for that proposition to be taken seriously, and there aren't enough Jews here for us to take the Talmud super seriously as a consensus forming definition of the moral law. But the Ten Commandments can easily be conceived of as the moral law. And then we can begin to have very real and meaningful conversations about the connection between religion in Maine and politics and government that is rooted in and based upon the moral law, which is the Ten Commandments. And then we can start to see some meaningful change in all of our villages, towns, and cities in Maine. Because the Ten Commandments exist.
Well, that sounds like a perfect wrap up, and I don't want to add anything to it, but it's like this is how we always, everybody that's watching, if there's still people on or not totally offended by anything that I've said.
Yeah, right. No, our numbers climb very slowly to 11. We have 11 according to StreamYard. But I think there's more. If
you're looking for offensive material, just stay on for the next hour while Mike and I talk. But
I gotta let you go. You got a day to.
Yeah. You take care, brother, and thank you very much. I love being educated by you, so you take care of yourself, okay?
Well, I feel the same way about you. So we'll be back next week.
All right.
10 o'clock, right? Are we good on that for next week?
Yes, sir. Yep. See you next week.
All right.
Bye.
All right. God bless.